Ladies and gentlemen, with the ink still fresh on the divorce papers, the man I loved more than my own life had snatched the $15 million estate, the product of my youth and passion, right out from under me. Not only did he throw me out of the house empty-handed, but he had the cruelty to toss a vibrant red wedding invitation in my face, featuring a photo of him and his mistress smiling happily. He said with a mocking voice, "Come this weekend and congratulate us, ex-wife. Come see what real happiness looks like." I stood there, feeling like the most miserable woman in the world among the wreckage of my shattered marriage. But when I arrived back at my mother's apartment, tears staining the invitation, my mother wasn't angry at all when she saw it. She simply offered an enigmatic, cold smile. She patted my shoulder and said, "Don't cry, honey. Put on your makeup, dress beautifully, and go. Mom's going to show you a magnificent performance. Every great show starts with an invitation. I am Isabel, an interior designer. I fell in love at first sight with Ethan, an attractive and talented media executive. He showed me a dazzling world, painted a rosy future, and I believed him wholeheartedly. We married, and the greatest wedding gift my mother, Eleanor, gave us was a sprawling estate in the exclusive Hamptons, which we called The Haven. My mother was a simple homemaker who, after losing my father early, had raised me alone with great struggle. I knew she had invested every last cent of her savings to purchase that precious gift. That is why I valued that house even more, dedicating 3 years of my youth and passion to personally design and oversee its construction, transforming it into a work of art. I wanted to repay my mother's heart and build a happy home with the man I loved, but I didn't know that paradise would soon turn into hell. As soon as the estate was completed and appraised at $15 million, Ethan started to change. He became cold, often coming home late. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, who had always looked down on me because she felt my family background wasn't up to theirs, became even worse. She moved in with us, turning me into her unpaid servant and constantly tormenting me with criticism. However, the pinnacle of the lies and cruelty came from Ethan himself. About 2 months ago, he came home with a face full of worry and distress. He claimed his media company was in dire straits and needed a large sum of money to avoid bankruptcy. He pleaded with me, saying this estate was the only thing that could save him. He wanted to mortgage it for a loan. "Isabel, help me just this once," he said, his eyes welling with tears as he held my hands. "If we get through this, I will make it all up to you. This house is yours. I just need to put it solely in my name for the loan application. I would never take it from you." As a wife who loved and blindly trusted her husband, how could I bear to watch him sink? I didn't hesitate for a moment. The next day, he took me to a notary public. On the table was a thick stack of documents. He pointed out where I should sign, saying it was a collateral guarantee agreement, a necessary procedure for the bank loan. Consumed with worry for my husband and trusting him completely, I signed without carefully reading every page. That was the fatal mistake of my life. I didn't know that among the dozens of pages of that guarantee agreement, he had cleverly inserted an interspousal transfer deed. My signature, dashed off in a state of emotional turmoil, ended my ownership of the masterpiece in which I had poured all my passion. Once he achieved his goal, his true nature emerged. He no longer looked sad or worried. He came home, not alone, but accompanied by Chloe, an influencer I vaguely suspected was his mistress. In front of me and my mother-in-law, he casually declared, "I want a divorce." My mother-in-law, instead of being surprised, smiled with satisfaction. It turned out that everything had been a charade orchestrated by them. The story of the company crisis was just an excuse to trick me into signing the papers to steal the house. "Look at you," he sneered. "Always stuck at home. You're so plain and boring. You don't fit into my world anymore. Chloe is my kind of woman." I was paralyzed. In a single afternoon, I had lost everything. The husband I loved, the house I had put my soul into, and my faith in love. They threw me out with an old suitcase and a broken heart, and to rub salt in the wound, he pulled the wedding invitation from his pocket and threw it at my feet. "Oh, I almost forgot," he said with a devilish smile. "This weekend, Chloe and I are getting married right here on this estate. Come and congratulate us. Come and see what kind of woman is worthy of me and this house." I stood there crying under the hot summer sun, feeling extreme humiliation, helplessness, and despair. I had nowhere to go. I could only drag my heavy suitcase back to my mother's small apartment in the city. Seeing me return in such a pathetic state, my mother didn't ask much. She just hugged me in silence. Crying, I told her everything: Ethan's betrayal and the wicked plot he used to steal the estate. I showed her the invitation, the proof of my humiliation. I thought she would cry with me, get angry, and curse that traitor. But she didn't. She looked at the invitation in silence, and an enigmatic, inscrutable smile I had never seen before appeared on her lips. "They're getting married at the Haven?" she asked in a strangely calm voice. "Good, very good." I looked at her, astonished. "Mom, why would you say that?" She put down the invitation and lightly patted my shoulder. Her eyes, usually so gentle, now held a sharp, calculating glint I had never noticed. "Don't cry, honey," she said firmly. "Make yourself beautiful, choose your most spectacular dress, and go to that wedding. I promise you, a magnificent performance awaits you." A truly magnificent performance. Dear readers, if you are wondering what magnificent performance the mother has prepared and how her daughter will get justice from that cunning ex-husband, like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the thrilling and cathartic continuation of this story. My mother's enigmatic smile, far from alleviating my pain, left me even more confused and lost. My world had just collapsed. I had lost the husband I loved, the house I had invested all my passion into, and I had been humiliated to the core of my being. How could my mother be so calm? How could she smile at her own daughter's tragedy? "Mom," I sobbed, leaning on her shoulder, "it's all over. I have nothing. He even took the house you gave me. I'm useless. I couldn't protect it." I thought she would comfort me, tell me that material possessions can be recovered, but instead, she patted my back and helped me sit down. She looked me straight in the eye, and her normally tender gaze now held a strangely sharp intensity. "Isabel," she said, and her voice was no longer that of a loving mother but of someone completely in control. "Lift your head. Tears solve nothing. The one who should be crying now is not you, but that traitor." She went to the kitchen and prepared a cup of hot herbal tea for me. The warmth of the cup spread through my hands, but it could not thaw my frozen heart. I sat staring blankly at the white wall. My mind was empty. Only the image of Ethan and Chloe smiling happily on the invitation, and his cruel words, "Come see what real happiness looks like," resonated in my head. My mother sat across from me. She watched me silently, saying nothing. Her look was not one of pity, but of patience, as if she were waiting for me to calm down on my own. After a long while, when my sobs subsided, she spoke slowly. "Isabel, have you ever wondered why I always hid my past? Why I told people I was a simple homemaker, living off the small pension your father left?" I looked at her, confused. "No, I never wondered. I always believed it. I thought you struggled your whole life to raise me, and that the estate was everything you had." My mother sighed slightly and walked over to an old wooden cabinet in the corner of the room. She opened a locked drawer and pulled out a dark red lacquer box marked by time. She placed it on the table and carefully opened it. Inside were no jewels or money, but old black and white photos and several yellowed notebooks. "This is the real me," she said calmly. She handed me a photo. In it, an elegant young woman posed next to a famous French chef. Below the photo, an inscription read, "Eleanor Vance, winner of the International Master Chef Competition, Paris, 1995. I gasped, "Mom, is this you?" "Yes," she nodded. She handed me another photo, where she was shaking hands with a head of state at the opening of a luxury restaurant. Then came clippings from famous gourmet magazines. They all spoke of one woman, the grand dame of American hospitality. "Mom, you are," I stammered, incredulous. "I am the founder and owner of the Sovereign Group," she said in a serene voice. The Sovereign Group. That name hit me like lightning. It was a national brand, a hospitality and gourmet empire valued in the billions, with hundreds of luxury hotels and restaurants across the country and abroad. "But why?" "Because of your father," she said, and a deep sadness crossed her gaze. "Your father was a good man, a talented artist. I loved him madly, but he could never overcome my shadow, which was too large. My money and fame, without realizing it, killed his self-esteem and his talent. He lived his whole life feeling inferior and guilty. She took my hand. When your father died, I promised myself I wouldn't let that tragedy repeat with you, my daughter. I wanted you to have a normal life, to find a man who truly loved you for you, not for the immense fortune you would inherit. That's why I decided to live in the shadows and hide everything. I watched Ethan very closely, she continued. Her voice hardened. At first, I hoped he was an ambitious and good man to you. I thought perhaps you had found the right man, but I still didn't completely trust him. The blood of an entrepreneur doesn't allow me to bet everything on a game with uncertain odds. So, she said with an enigmatic voice, when I gifted you the Haven, I didn't just give you a property. What does that gift mean? I asked, still not understanding. My mother smiled. It was the same cold smile I saw when she looked at the wedding invitation. It wasn't a simple gift, my daughter. It was a trap, a legally perfect trap. And Ethan, with his greed and ignorance, has walked right into it. Saying this, she pulled another folder from the box, bound in dark blue leather that looked new. Your real wedding gift is here. I took the folder from her trembling hands. It felt strangely heavy, not just because of the paper, but because of the secret I was about to discover. My mother's glorious past, the Sovereign Group empire. All of this already exceeded my imagination, and now it turned out that my wedding gift concealed another secret, a trap. I opened the cover, and the first thing my eyes saw was the phrase, "Conditional deed of gift of real property." "Conditional deed of gift," I murmured, understanding nothing. Exactly, my mother said. Her voice was now like that of an experienced attorney. When I decided to gift you the estate, I had the best legal team at the Sovereign Group draft this contract. It's not a normal deed of gift, my daughter. She pointed to a clause printed in small print, but carefully underlined. I squinted and read, Clause tres punt dos. Contract efficacy. The efficacy of this deed of gift and the property rights of the Doneys, Isabel and Ethan Hayes, shall only be recognized as long as both parties maintain a valid marital relationship, evidenced by a legal marriage certificate, and live together as a unified couple. I read the clause over and over, and then an astonishing realization began to dawn in my mind. Mom, what does this mean? It means, my mother explained clearly, that the ownership of the estate is directly tied to your marital status. As long as you are husband and wife, the house is yours. But the moment the marriage is legally dissolved by divorce, this deed of gift is automatically voided, and the property immediately reverts to its original owner, me. The world seemed to spin before my eyes, a perfect legal trap, a move that even the most cunning person could not have foreseen. But he already tricked me into signing the deed over to him, Mom, I said, still worried. What good does that do? My mother scoffed. He's just a mid-level media executive. How could he possibly outsmart my legal team? Those papers he made you sign, whether they are a deed of transfer or a property agreement, are legally considered secondary transactions derived from the original contract. To put it simply, my mother said, Ethan's claim of ownership grew from the root of the contract I gave you. Now that you have divorced, that root has been severed. The tree has no choice but to wither and die. All subsequent documents are worthless. The house has not been his from the moment the judge issued the divorce decree. Right now, he is illegally residing in my house. I was completely stunned. My mother, whom I thought only knew cooking, possessed a terrifyingly calculating mind and foresight. She had foreseen everything. She had prepared an escape route for me from the beginning. Ethan, my mother continued scornfully, made the fatal mistake of the greedy and short-sighted. He focused so much on how to steal the property that he forgot to protect the one thing that gave him access to it. You. He single-handedly destroyed the only clause that could have given him everything. My pain seemed to shrink by half, and in its place a small, jubilant joy began to bloom. So, what do we do now? Do we sue him immediately and take back the house? Sue? Why the rush, honey? My mother smiled. It was the same cold smile I saw when she looked at the wedding invitation. What fun would a lawsuit be? We don't have to do anything. Just sit back and wait for the fish to jump into the net themselves." She picked up the wedding invitation from the table and admired it as if it were a work of art. "He sent an invitation, didn't he? He said he wanted to get married right there on that estate. Perfect. The more noise he makes, the more humiliating his downfall will be. He wanted the wedding of the century, and I will give him the disaster of the century." "What do you mean, Mom?" I still couldn't follow her thinking. "Did he hire a catering company?" "Yes, I heard it's a luxury catering company called Royal Provisions." "Excellent." My mother nodded, her eyes shining with cunning. "Then things are even easier than I thought." She didn't explain further, stood up, and walked to the window. "What you need to do," she said, taking my hand, "is wipe away your tears, get rid of all the sadness, go shopping, make yourself beautiful, and choose the most dazzling dress. That day, you must appear as a queen to witness the fall of those who despised you. Leave everything else in my hands." Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time they were not tears of pain, but of gratitude, joy, and the happiness of knowing I was not alone. I had my mother, a mother who not only loved me but was a warrior, a true queen. The wedding invitation on the table was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It had become an invitation to witness that man's downfall, and I would be the spectator in the front row. Once the plan for revenge was drawn up, my mood changed completely. Pain and despair were replaced by a strange anticipation and excitement. I was no longer the victim of a tragedy. I became a spectator awaiting a magnificent performance that was about to begin, and the main actors, Ethan and Chloe, did not disappoint me. They played their roles perfectly, with impeccable brazenness and ridicule. Ethan, having easily secured a $15 million estate and rid himself of me a thorn in his side, was like a tiger loose in the jungle. He no longer hid or beat around the bush. He publicized his relationship with Chloe and began flaunting it in all media and social networks, as if wanting to shout his victory to the whole world. Chloe's social media, the influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers, suddenly became a reality TV channel, showcasing her luxurious life at the Haven estate. Every day, she posted dozens of photos and stories. Today, a photo of her posing next to the infinity pool in a designer bikini with the caption, "Peace in my corner of paradise." Tomorrow, a photo of a breakfast served on the balcony, beautiful as in a magazine, accompanied by the exclamation, "When you wake up every day, and the person you love has prepared such a breakfast for you, can one be happier?" Seeing those photos, I could only laugh scornfully. That paradise she was enjoying had been taken care of by me, brick by brick, blade of grass by blade of grass. That breakfast she boasted about was probably bought quickly by Ethan because he didn't even know how to boil an egg. But the peak of the ostentation were the posts about the preparations for their wedding of the century. Ethan, as a media executive, pulled all his strings to turn this wedding into a major publicity event. He invited online gossip magazines and famous bloggers to cover it. He spared no expense, investing enormous sums in hiring the best service providers. Chloe's wedding dress would be custom designed by a famous French designer. The wedding bands would be a pair of limited edition diamond rings from Tiffany & Co. And the banquet, of course, would be held in the Haven Garden with hundreds of VIP guests, catered by the regal company Royal Provisions. As Ethan proudly declared in an interview, every time an article was published, every time an image was shared, it was like another knife plunged into my heart. But now it didn't hurt. On the contrary, it made me feel more satisfied. The bigger and louder they were, the more miserable their fall would be. Meanwhile, my mother and I led a quiet life. My mother took me to one of her high-security, completely private penthouses downtown. "Rest here," she told me. "Your only job now is to make yourself truly beautiful, truly radiant." She hired the best team of experts for me, a nutritionist, a personal trainer, a skincare specialist. I started a scientific regimen of exercise and diet. I read books, listened to music, learned more about art. I was not only recovering physically, but reinventing my whole soul. Sometimes old mutual friends would send me articles about Ethan and Chloe, adding words of comfort and encouragement. "Forget him, that kind of person doesn't deserve you. I'm sick of seeing that girl. What a shameless mistress. I only smiled and thanked them. They didn't know I didn't need their pity. I was waiting for a different performance. Drunk on victory, Ethan had completely lowered his guard. He didn't wonder at all why I had disappeared so quietly. Perhaps he thought I was so hurt that I had accepted my fate and hidden somewhere to lick my wounds. Nor did he suspect anything about the catering company he had chosen. The fame and exorbitant price of Royal Provisions led him to believe it was the perfect choice to demonstrate his status. He didn't know he was placing the sharpest knife in the hands of his enemy. Their charade of ostentation became increasingly ridiculous. Chloe even made a house tour video, showing off every corner of the estate, presenting the furniture I had personally chosen as if it were the result of her exquisite taste. In the comments section, thousands of people praised her, but some of my friends who had visited the estate recognized the truth. "Hey, Isabel chose that ceramic vase. That layout looks familiar. It's exactly Isabel's style." But those comments were quickly deleted. They wanted to erase all trace of me, to act as if I had never existed in that house. But they didn't know that the soul of this estate and the soul of the performance about to begin were in someone else's hands. The offices of Royal Provisions were located on the top floor of a luxury building in the heart of Manhattan. Ethan and Chloe entered with their heads held high, as if they were VIP clients. They were led to a private meeting room with glass walls offering views of the entire city. A middle-aged woman in an impeccable black suit and her hair neatly pulled back entered. It was Miss Davis, the operations director of Royal Provisions, and one of my mother's most competent right-hand people. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Thompson, good morning," Miss Davis smiled professionally. "It is a great honor for us to serve at your wedding of the century." "Good morning, Miss Davis," Ethan said smugly, shaking her hand. "You know Royal Provisions' reputation. My wedding must be the best in everything, the most perfect. Money is no object." "Of course," Miss Davis nodded. "That's our motto. What are your ideas for the banquet menu?" Chloe, who had been quiet until now, opened her mouth in a saccharine voice. "I'm not really into rustic American cuisine. I'm more accustomed to international dishes. The menu has to be truly luxurious, full of things like Alaskan king crab, Wagyu beef, French foie gras. I'm not used to low-class heavy food like chitlins or Brunswick stew." She glanced sideways at Ethan, as if to send a veiled message about me, his rustic ex-wife. Ethan nodded approvingly. "That's right, my Chloe has very refined taste. Miss Davis, prepare the most exclusive menu. My guests are all people of status. We cannot disappoint them." Miss Davis only smiled meaningfully. She noted all their requests in her notebook. "Yes, understood. I promise we will prepare a special menu that will give you and all your guests an unforgettable gastronomic experience." After bidding farewell to Ethan and Chloe, Miss Davis immediately made a call. "Madam Chairwoman, the fish has bitten." On the other end of the line, my mother, Eleanor, was sitting in her study sipping tea. She smiled slightly. "Good, proceed according to plan. Tell the kitchen team to prepare the menu in the most special way." "Yes, understood. But, Madam Chairwoman," Miss Davis hesitated, "won't this affect Royal Provisions' reputation?" "Reputation?" My mother laughed. "What is the reputation of a subsidiary compared to the honor of my daughter? Besides, this is not destruction, it is a culinary art performance. We are going to teach them what the truth tastes like." And so, a detailed plan was elaborated. My mother, the grand dame of American hospitality, personally drafted the secret menu. She didn't need to be present, but all her orders were transmitted and executed absolutely. She called the most talented chef in the Sovereign Group restaurant chain, a master of traditional Southern cuisine, capable of turning the humblest dish into a work of art. "Your mission this time," she told him, "is not to make it taste good, but to make it taste very authentic. The flavor of lies and the flavor of the bill coming due." All preparations were carried out in secret. Ethan and Chloe remained convinced they would have a royal banquet. A few days before the wedding, Royal Provisions sent them a fake menu full of bombastic names in French: seared foie gras with fig sauce, baked lobster thermidor. They nodded contentedly upon seeing the menu, unaware that behind those names hid a completely different truth. They were too intoxicated by victory, too arrogant to have the slightest caution. They didn't know that this arrogance was turning them into puppets in my mother's hands. In the days following that fateful meeting with the catering company, my world changed completely. I no longer spent nights crying or woke up in the mornings with a feeling of emptiness and despair. The pain was still there, like a deep wound that would never fully heal, but it no longer dominated me. In its place, a new feeling burned, a flame that had risen from the ashes of betrayal, determination. I was no longer Isabel, the weak, abandoned wife. I was slowly becoming the daughter of my mother, Eleanor Vance, the grand dame of American hospitality, a woman who would never allow anyone else to decide her fate. My mother had not only given me a plan for revenge, but something much more important. She had given me back my self-esteem. "Don't waste your tears on someone who doesn't deserve them, my daughter," she told me. "Instead of crying, turn the pain into strength. Stand up, hold your head high, and show the world that without him, you are 10,000 times better off." And that is what I did. I began a transformation process, a reinvention of myself, both inside and out. My mother's luxurious penthouse was no longer a refuge for my sadness. It became my personal training center. Every morning, instead of curling up under the covers, I got up at 5 a.m. to practice yoga with my mother on the terrace, breathing the fresh city air and feeling a new energy filling my body. Afterward, I spent an hour in the private gym under the supervision of the best personal trainer. Every drop of sweat not only restored my figure, but also washed away the worries and bitterness accumulated over a long time. My diet also changed completely. My mother, with her expert gastronomic knowledge, personally designed a nutritious diet for me that was not only healthy, but also helped improve my skin and figure. I no longer skipped meals or ate just anything. I learned to take care of my body, to love myself, something I had completely forgotten in the last 3 years. But the biggest change was not physical but mental. My mother didn't give me a second to wallow in negative thoughts. She took me to art exhibitions, to classical music concerts. She introduced me to her friends, successful businesswomen, talented artists. I came into contact with a completely different world, a world of knowledge, creativity, and strong, independent women. I listened to their stories, learned from their experiences, and slowly realized that a woman's world cannot revolve solely around one man. It was a much wider and more colorful world. And my mother took me to her best friend, the famous fashion designer, Mrs. Montgomery. "Eliza," she said, "help this child find herself again. Create an outfit that transforms her from Cinderella to a true queen." Mrs. Montgomery looked at me with the piercing gaze of an artist. She didn't ask about my past, she simply observed my gaze, my walk, even how I sat, in silence. "Eleanor," she said, "don't worry. This child is not Cinderella. She has always been a princess. She just momentarily forgot where she left her crown." For the following week, I spent most of my time in Mrs. Montgomery's design studio. She didn't just try dresses on me. She taught me about style, about how to combine outfits, about the language of fashion. She told me that clothes are not just to cover the body, they are a statement of who you are. "Choose a color that tells your story right now," she said. And I chose ruby red, the color of power, charm, passion, and vengeance. The evening gown was ready the day before the wedding. When I put it on and looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The high-quality satin silk dress fit my body perfectly, highlighting every curve I had achieved with exercise. A bold, strapless neckline, a deeply cut back, and a high slit. I was no longer the image of the docile and simple Isabel. The woman in the mirror was a completely different person, seductive, mysterious, and with an air of authority. "Magnificent," Mrs. Montgomery admired. "Isabel, you don't have to do anything. The moment you walk in there, you will have already won." I smiled. I was ready. I no longer felt fear or resentment, just a strange calm. I wasn't going there to ruin a party or recover what was lost. That love, that person, were no longer worth it. I was going there as a special spectator to see a performance and to officially put an end to my past. I would show Ethan, Chloe, and his entire family how splendid and strong the woman they had cruelly discarded had been reborn. That weekend, the Hampton sky was clear and sunny, as if wanting to further enhance the wedding of the century for Ethan and Chloe. The Haven estate, into which I had poured all my passion, was now ostentatiously decorated, but in a completely different style. The refined and cozy atmosphere I had tried to create was gone, replaced by exaggerated opulent luxury. Thousands of white and pink roses formed a gigantic floral arch. White silk ribbons hung everywhere, and in the center of the garden, a large stage had been erected with a massive LED screen, projecting the couple's romantic wedding photos on a loop. Everything was perfect, an ostentatious perfection on the outside, but empty on the inside. From noon on, luxury cars began arriving in a line. The guests were all influential personalities from the world of business and entertainment. Journalists and the press also gathered in the press area, ready to capture every moment of this much-talked-about event. The party protagonists, Ethan and Chloe, appeared as a fairy tale prince and princess. Chloe wore a wedding dress from a famous brand with thousands of glittering diamonds. Her face was perfectly made up, and her happy smile was unrestrained. She clung to Ethan's arm, moving from table to table, receiving congratulations and envious glances. She was at the peak of her life. She had landed a rich husband, the wedding of her dreams, and an estate that millions would envy. She didn't know that all of it was a sandcastle about to be swept away by a tsunami. Ethan was also drunk on victory. He looked elegant and self-assured. Having seized the estate and married a beautiful, rich new wife made him feel like a king. He wanted everyone to flatter and envy him. He had completely forgotten my existence, or perhaps he deliberately tried to forget it. To him, I was a mistake of the past, a stain that had been cleaned. My ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, also dressed in an elegant pantsuit, moved back and forth, boasting about the new daughter-in-law who was indeed worthy of her son. "Look, this is how my son's wife should be," she proudly told her friends. "Beautiful, capable, and knows how to treat people. She is a blessing to our family." She didn't know that the blessing she was bragging about was about to turn into a catastrophe. The wedding ceremony went smoothly and perfectly. They exchanged rings, cut the cake, and toasted with champagne. The applause was continuous. Ethan took the microphone, his voice full of false emotion. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today. Today, I am the happiest man in the world because I have married the most wonderful woman, Chloe." He turned to the bride and kissed her forehead. The entire venue erupted in applause and cheers again. Camera flashes fired incessantly, immortalizing their golden moment. They were at the height of fulfillment, of victory, and that was the perfect moment. And then the master of ceremonies announced, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, raise your glasses and prepare to enjoy the royal banquet prepared by the best catering company in New York, Royal Provisions." That was the signal. I, who until now had been sitting quietly in the parked car outside, observing everything in secret, smiled slightly. Their performance was over, and now it was time for my mother's show to begin. Following orders, dozens of waiters in white uniforms slowly emerged from the kitchen area, respectfully carrying trays of food covered with silver lids. Everyone was expectant. They wondered what delicacies would be served at such a luxurious wedding. Lobster? Filet mignon, or perhaps something exotic. Ethan and Chloe also looked at the service team. A satisfied smile still lingered on their lips. They were ready to receive the admiration and praise of their guests, and the silver lids were lifted in unison. But what appeared beneath was neither lobster nor Wagyu beef. The luxurious banquet space was suddenly filled with a very characteristic, intense, earthy aroma, completely out of place in that setting. It was the pungent odor of spicy Brunswick stew, accompanied by deep-fried chitlins. The instant the silver lids were lifted in unison, the luxurious garden space of the estate fell into stunned silence. The melodic background music suddenly became incongruous, and the laughter died away. Hundreds of guests, dressed in their elegant evening gowns and tuxedos, looked with an indescribable expression at the dishes that had just been placed on their tables. There were no red Alaskan king crabs, no fragrant grilled Wagyu beef, no rich French foie gras. Instead, before them lay the most rustic dishes one could imagine. Dishes they probably would never have imagined seeing at the wedding of the century. On the white English porcelain plates with delicate gold rims, artful presentations of Brunswick stew Saturday. Alongside the stew, carefully arranged pieces of deep-fried chitlins, chitterlings, lay quintessential street food dishes, respectfully served at the tables of a multi-million-dollar wedding. But what caused the strongest impression, what seized everyone's sense of smell, was the stew itself, a potent, heavy dish, its characteristic odor permeating the air. For gourmets, it was an aroma representing the Southern soul, but in such a luxurious wedding hall, it was an olfactory disaster. The intense smell of the chitlins ruthlessly made its way into every corner of the garden, mixing with the ladies' Chanel No. 5 perfume to create the strangest combination of scents in the world. After a few seconds of stupefaction, the guests began to look at each other. What were initially only whispers began to turn into a growing murmur. What? What is this? Chitlins? Am I seeing this right? My God, what is that terrible smell? Some of the ladies, accustomed to immaculate environments, had to wrinkle their faces in disgust and cover their noses. Even the journalists and reporters invited to write complimentary articles about the lavish wedding were left open-mouthed, cameras in hand, unsure whether they should take photos or not. This was not a simple accident. It was a humiliation, elaborately and artistically orchestrated. The first to collapse was the party's protagonist, the bride, Chloe. She was standing on the stage with a happy smile still on her lips. But when the intense smell of the stew reached her nose and she looked down to see the deep-fried chitlins respectfully served on the tables, her smile froze. Her perfectly made-up face went from red to pale, and then colorless. She was the influencer who had always built a refined, high-class image on social media. She always boasted about dining at Michelin-starred restaurants and said she couldn't eat low-class food. And now, on the most important day of her life, under the spotlight of hundreds of cameras and the eyes of her peers, she had to face a banquet full of Brunswick stew and chitlins. A wave of extreme shame and embarrassment washed over her. She felt like she had been stripped naked and mocked mercilessly. "Ethan? Ethan?" She turned to him, her voice cracking. What is happening?" But Ethan was in no mood to comfort her. He too was stunned. His attractive face was now red with anger and humiliation. He had spent millions on this grand wedding to consolidate his status. He had mobilized all his connections. He wanted everyone to admire and envy him. But now, he only received looks of bewilderment, muffled giggles, and a smell of chitlins that couldn't be washed away. His wedding of the century had turned into the laughingstock of the century. He felt as if he had been slapped from the heavens, an invisible slap that hurt him to the bone, and the surprise turned into uncontrollable rage. He was sure someone had tried to ruin his wedding, and that person could be no one else but me. Isabel. That he clenched his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. He forgot all pretense, all his role. Now he was just a man maddened by humiliation. Ethan's anger erupted like a long-contained volcano. He didn't care about the guests or the bride sobbing beside him. His only goal was to find the culprit of this disaster and tear them to shreds. He rushed down from the stage, his face flushed and eyes bloodshot, searching everywhere. "Where is the manager? The manager of Royal Provisions. Get out here now," he shouted, and his voice echoed throughout the garden, drowning out the music and the people's murmurs. Everyone stepped aside, frightened by the groom's fury. Immediately, Miss Davis, the impeccable, calm woman Ethan still believed was a high executive, emerged from the kitchen area. Her face was surprisingly serene and professional. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. To what do we owe your anger?" "You still ask?" Ethan ran up and grabbed Miss Davis by the lapels. "It was an extremely rude and uncontrolled act. Look what you've done to my wedding. Chitlins? Brunswick stew? Are you all crazy? Do you know how much I paid for this wedding? Do you want me to ruin you?" Miss Davis showed no fear. She calmly pushed Ethan's hands away and straightened her lapels. "Mr. Hayes, I recommend you calm down. All the food today has been prepared, according to the menu we agreed upon." "Agreed upon?" Ethan shouted incredulously. "What are you talking about? My menu was king crab and wagyu beef. Who agreed to this disgusting menu with you?" "You did yourself," Miss Davis replied with an imperturbable voice. She then motioned for an employee to bring her a folder. "This is the contract you signed with us, and here is the menu appendix with your signature at the bottom." She opened the last page. There, under a long list of traditional Southern dishes, was Ethan's signature, clear and undeniable. The day he signed the contract, he was too confident and unprepared. He only glanced at the main clauses and signed all the pages without carefully reading the appendix. He had fallen into the most basic trap. It's her. He raised his head, his bloodshot eyes staring into the void as if seeing me. I'm sure. It's that Isabel. She conspired with you to harm me. Where is she? Where is she? He shouted like a crazed beast, starting to search for me. The scene was total chaos. Guests began to feel the situation was getting serious, and some got up and quietly left. They had come to congratulate, not to witness such a disgraceful farce. Chloe, after a few moments of stupefaction, also couldn't bear it anymore. Shame turned into anger. She also ran up, but not to stop Ethan, but to vent. What have you done, Ethan? She hit his chest with her fists, crying, What have you turned our wedding into? A laughingstock, a circus. I should have known. Marrying a man with a past as complicated as yours was sure to bring trouble. Now look, all of New York will laugh at me. Shut up! Ethan shoved her hard, and she nearly fell. What do you know? This is all my ex-wife's fault. She's here, she's definitely here, laughing at us. He was right. I was here. But not to laugh. I was sitting in a car with black-tinted windows parked right outside the estate gate, calmly observing everything through a screen connected to a hidden camera. Beside me was my mother, Eleanor. She simply sat and took a sip of tea without any expression on her face. Is it time, Mom? I asked in a slightly trembling voice. My mother set down the teacup. Yes, she nodded. It's time for the Queen to make her entrance. She gestured to the chauffeur. The iron gates of the estate slowly opened, and our car slowly advanced toward the center of the chaotic scene. All the noises and discussions suddenly ceased. From the couple to the remaining guests, everyone turned in astonishment to look at the luxurious sedan driving in. They knew the protagonist of the show had finally appeared. My mother's black Audi A8 slowly advanced toward the center of the chaotic scene, smooth and silent, like a black panther entering its territory. It stopped in the center of the garden, just a few feet from where the couple stood frozen, right where the stage lights shone brightest. All the noises faded. Ethan's screams, Chloe's sobs, the guests' murmurs. Everything vanished, leaving only the low hum of the vehicle's engine and the heartbeats of those present. They held their breath, waiting to see who would step out of this luxurious, uninvited car. The car's rear door slowly opened. First, a pair of ruby-red Christian Louboutin stilettos appeared. The blood-red sole was arrogant and authoritative. Then, a slender silhouette in a dazzling ruby-red evening gown. It was me, Isabel. The moment I stepped out of the car, the entire garden fell into an explosive silence. I was no longer the Isabel of yesterday. I was not the woman with the tired face, old clothes, and gaze always cast downward. The woman standing before them now was a completely different person. My hair was pulled back in an elaborate updo, revealing my long neck and sparkling diamond earrings. Professional makeup had concealed any trace of fatigue, leaving only a sharp face, red lips, and a calm, cold gaze. The ruby-red dress fit my body, accentuating every curve I had achieved with exercise, turning me into a dazzling flame that burned every gaze. I stood tall, with an elegant poise, in complete contrast to the disheveled, mascara-streaked bride, Chloe, next to me. My appearance, as splendid as it could be, was a silent provocation. It was a direct slap in the face of Ethan and his family. Isabel! Ethan was the first to react. Surprise soon turned into even greater anger than before. He thought everything, from the Chitlin banquet to this chaos, was my doing to ruin him. You dare to show up here, he shouted, pointing a finger at me. This is all you're doing, isn't it? You conspired with them to ruin my wedding? Is it because you're jealous? He lunged at me like a crazed beast, but he was easily stopped by my mother's robust, black-suited chauffeur. Let me go! I have to teach that wench a lesson, he struggled, shouting expletives. My ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, also reacted. After the initial shock, only hatred and anger remained. She also ran up next to her son and began her usual dramatics. My God, look at this, everyone. It's my ex-daughter-in-law. she wailed to the remaining guests. After my son left her, now she comes back to ruin the wedding. What a shameless woman, to proudly return after being thrown out. You can tell she was raised without a proper family. She deliberately emphasized the words "without a proper family," trying to twist the knife in my pain. But it no longer hurt. I watched them act in silence. I saw the man I once loved, now insulting me with the ugliest words. I saw the woman I tried to treat as a mother, now using the vilest words to humiliate me. The crazier they became, the more miserable their fall would be. "Are you two finished acting?" I finally opened my mouth. My voice wasn't loud, but it was so calm and authoritative that it silenced them both. "You said I ruined your wedding, Mr. Hayes. Look at yourself again and see who is turning this wedding into a laughingstock. Is it me, or is it the groom himself who is screaming and grabbing the waiter by the lapels like a lunatic?" Then I turned to Mrs. Hayes. "Madam, I no longer called her mother. You said I have no shame. Then, does a mother-in-law who condones her son's infidelity and conspires with him to trick his daughter-in-law and seize her assets have any shame?" My words were like bullets that pierced directly into their hypocritical faces. They were speechless, unable to reply. And I said, "I have not come here today to ruin any wedding. I have come here as a guest." I held up the vibrant red wedding invitation that Ethan had thrown in my face. "The groom himself invited me to come and see what real happiness looks like. I am simply answering his invitation." My audacity made Ethan turn red with rage. You. He was speechless, only able to point a finger at me. "This is not your place. Leave right now. Get out of my house right now." "My house?" I smiled meaningfully. "Are you sure this is your house, Mr. Hayes?" "Of course. The deed is in my name. Get out now or I'll call security," he shouted. "Ah, yes," I said defiantly. "Then call them. I'd love to see who the guards of my house obey." My words exploded like another bomb, astonishing everyone once again. "Your house? What are you talking about?" Even Ethan hesitated, and a vague uneasiness began to creep into his mind. Just at that moment, from the kitchen area, still in chaos, the figure of a woman in an elegant, authoritative dark blue silk suit slowly appeared. Behind her followed a team of about 10 people in black suits and briefcases who looked like a powerful legal team, and that woman was none other than my mother. My mother's appearance was like a sedative that instantly calmed all the chaos. She walked unhurriedly, and every step exuded the composure of someone who had the situation under control. She didn't look at Ethan or Mrs. Hayes. Her gaze swept the entire room, and everyone who met that sharp, authoritative look instinctively had to lower their heads. And then something unexpected happened. Some of the banquet guests, older, influential personalities from the world of business and real estate, were stunned when they saw my mother and hurriedly stood up to greet her with a respectful bow. "Madam Chairwoman Eleanor, what a surprise to see you here." "Eleanor, it's been so long. You look as wonderful as ever." "Mrs. Vance, what an honor." Ethan and his mother were completely dumbfounded. "Madam Chairwoman? What chairwoman? My mother? A homemaker? Why were these successful business people bowing to her?" "Ma'am," Isabel's mother, Mrs. Hayes, stammered, incredulous. How are you here? Who let you in?" My mother finally turned slowly toward her. She was not angry. She simply looked at Mrs. Hayes with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Why do I need your permission to enter my own house?" she said in a voice that, though not loud, carried the weight of 1,000 tons. "House? Your house?" Mrs. Hayes burst into hysterical laughter. "You've gone mad. This is my son's house. Don't talk nonsense." "Oh, really?" My mother offered the same mocking smile I had shown earlier. She gestured to one of the men on her legal team. The lawyer immediately stepped forward and opened his briefcase. "Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, good morning." The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, said firmly. "I am Attorney Sterling, representative of the rightful owner of this estate, Mrs. Eleanor Vance." He held up a folder with the red seal of a notary. "According to the conditional deed of gift of real property, document number 1234, drafted on March 15th of last year, my client, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, gifted the property of the Haven Estate to her daughter, Mrs. Isabel Hayes, and her son-in-law, Mr. Ethan Hayes. The lawyer paused and looked directly into Ethan's face. However, Clause 3.2 of the contract clearly states that this contract is only valid as long as Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Isabel Hayes maintain a valid marital relationship. On the 7th of this month, he continued, the Family Court of New York issued a divorce decree for the two of you. This means that the precondition of the contract has been destroyed, and by law, this deed of gift is officially voided. The entire room fell silent. Everyone listened to the lawyer's words, holding their breath. In conclusion, the lawyer concluded, the ownership of this estate has automatically reverted to its original owner, my client, Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Any subsequent documents of title change that Mr. Hayes made Mrs. Isabel Hayes sign through deception are legally invalid. Simply put, Mr. Hayes, you and your family are holding an illegal party on someone else's property. No, it's impossible. It's a lie, Ethan shouted. He lunged to snatch the folder, but was stopped by two of my mother's sturdy bodyguards. These are all state-certified legal documents, Attorney Sterling said coolly. If you don't believe it, we can meet in court. My mother finally slowly stepped forward. She didn't look at Ethan, but at the bride Chloe, who was trembling with a pale face. Congratulations, my dear. My mother's voice suddenly softened. Chloe, right? You are very beautiful. I am Eleanor Vance, chairwoman of the Sovereign Group and also the owner of Royal Provisions, the company you hired. Thank you for trusting our services. Another bomb exploded. Chloe and Ethan were completely petrified. And as the owner of the house, my mother continued. Her smile widened. I personally designed today's menu to entertain the guests. Full of traditional dishes, full of feeling. Spicy Brunswick stew, deep-fried chitlins. I heard you don't like rustic food. That's okay, try it. Maybe you'll like it. Every word my mother spoke was sweet but sharp, stabbing directly into Chloe's pride. The shame, embarrassment, and fear of having married a man about to be ruined made her unable to bear it any longer. No, I'm not marrying him. I'm not marrying a scammer like you, she screamed. She tore the diamond ring from her finger and threw it in Ethan's face. Then, clutching her cumbersome wedding dress, she ran crying out of the estate under hundreds of bewildered glances and the incessant camera flashes. The performance had come to an end, and the person who had written the finale was none other than my mother. The grand dame of American hospitality could not have reappeared in a more spectacular fashion. Chloe's performance ended with a humiliating flight, leaving only a desolate void in the center of the banquet stage. The bride had fled, and the dream of a wealthy family had vanished like smoke. And the day's protagonist, the groom, was now just a miserable failure, standing stunned amid the wreckage of his deception. Ethan remained motionless, the red mark of the diamond ring Chloe had thrown still visible on his cheek. He no longer shouted or raged, he simply stared with lost eyes at the shadow of the bride who had just fled. Then he looked down at the plates of chitlins that still gave off their penetrating odor, and finally looked at my mother and me, who stood on the winning side. Probably, even at that moment, he couldn't believe that all of this was real, a truth so hard and miserable that had fallen upon him in less than an hour. But my mother had no intention of giving him more time to digest the truth. She had laid the trap, she had waited, and now it was time to collect the net. She didn't want this show to end halfway. She wanted a complete finale, a lesson that those who had tried to trample her daughter would not forget for the rest of their lives. After allowing the guests a few seconds to recover after the bride's scene, Attorney Sterling spoke again. His voice was cold and firm, without the slightest emotion, like a judge reading the final sentence. "Mr. Hayes," he said, looking directly at the stunned man, "I reiterate once again, in accordance with the provisions of the Civil Code and the certified conditional deed of gift, from the moment the divorce decree between you and Mrs. Isabel Hayes became effective, the deed of gift for the Haven estate was officially voided." He held up the folder once more as if to emphasize the irrefutability of its legal effect. "This means that all rights of ownership, use, and disposal of this property have automatically been transferred back to its original owner, our client, Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Any act of occupation and use of this address by you and your family after the date of the divorce is an illegal act." Every word from the lawyer was like a hammer blow to the minds of Ethan and his mother. Mrs. Hayes, who had collapsed onto a bench, finally reacted. She staggered up and pointed a finger at my mother. "It's a lie! You are all scammers!" she screamed hoarsely. "This house belongs to my son. We have the transfer papers Isabel signed. You have no right." My mother only looked at her with pity. "Mrs. Hayes," she said calmly, "ignorance of the law is not an excuse to exempt you from guilt. Those papers your son tricked my daughter into signing only have value if his ownership of this house is legitimate. But unfortunately, the moment he decided to divorce my daughter, he himself voided that ownership." She approached and looked her directly in the eye. "You were always very proud of your son, weren't you? You thought he was clever, talented, that he could calculate everything. But look, because of a little greed and myopia, he has become a fool, a nobody. Are you still proud of him?" My mother's words were like the final thrust that completely pierced Mrs. Hayes's pride. She was speechless, trembling from head to toe. She realized that everything had been a trap, a perfect trap that she and her son had willingly walked into. Attorney Sterling spoke again. His voice became extremely severe. "On behalf of the rightful owner, I formally demand that Mr. Ethan Hayes, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, and all unrelated persons vacate the premises of this estate immediately." "Vacate? This is my wedding. You have no right to kick me out." Ethan raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. "Your wedding is over," Attorney Sterling replied without the slightest concession. "The bride has fled, and you are holding an illegal event on someone else's property. According to the law, we have every right to demand that you cease this infringement immediately. If you do not cooperate, we will be forced to request the intervention of law enforcement." "You wouldn't dare." Ethan clenched his teeth. He still tried to cling to his last shred of pride. He could not accept the fact of being expelled from his own wedding of the century in front of hundreds of people. He looked around for support, but only received looks of bewilderment, compassionate headshakes, and glances of scorn. No one took his side. They had seen enough of his brazenness and stupidity. It was time for the show to end, and the final curtain was drawn by an irrefutable order. Seeing that Ethan remained stubborn, my mother said nothing more. She nodded slightly to the lawyer. Attorney Sterling immediately pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number. "Hello, Security Chief. We have some individuals who have illegally entered the chairwoman's property and are causing a disturbance. Please escort them out according to procedure." The call ended. In less than 2 minutes, a security team of about 20 people, all robust and tall, in black uniforms, entered silently and professionally from the gate. They were the internal security team of the Sovereign Group, trained to handle the most complex situations. Their appearance completely crushed any will for resistance from Ethan. He saw the security team approach him, and their imposing presence let him know that everything was truly over. The head of the security team bowed respectfully to my mother and me, and then turned to Ethan. "Mr. Hayes," he said in a low, authoritative voice, "we have received instructions to ask you and your family to leave this place. Please cooperate." "You don't have the right," Ethan still weakly shouted. "We do have the right," the team leader replied. "We are exercising our authority to protect the property on behalf of the rightful owner." Then he gestured. 2 security agents immediately approached Ethan and held his arms firmly. "Let me go. Do you know who I am?" He struggled, but it was useless. His strength was not comparable to that of professionally trained people. The image of the groom, in his luxury suit, being dragged away by 2 sturdy security guards, could not have been more miserable and ridiculous. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, seeing her son being taken away, screamed and ran to try to make a scene. "Let go of my son! You are thieves!" But she was also stopped by 2 female security agents. "Madam, please accompany us," they said politely, but their actions were very firm. All the family relatives, who until a moment ago had been arrogant and smug, were now expelled from the party venue in the most embarrassing way possible. They were led out like a flock of ducks, passing the tables still full of chitlins and Brunswick stew, under the compassionate glances of the remaining guests. Outside the gates of the estate, they once considered their paradise. Once the family was evicted, my mother took the microphone from the stage. She did not look at the stunned guests, but at the dozens of press cameras that were still recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, no longer as a mother avenging her daughter, but as an authoritative chairwoman. "I am Eleanor Vance, chairwoman of the Sovereign Group. I apologize for making you witness such a lamentable performance today." She paused and smiled, "but the banquet is already served, and the food is on the table. If you don't mind these traditional dishes, please help yourselves. Consider this an unexpected launch party for the future Sovereign Group restaurant brand at the Haven Estate." Her words, humorous but sharp, made the entire hall erupt in applause. Not only had she recovered her house, but she had turned a media disaster into an unbeatable public relations opportunity. "And as for my daughter," she continued, pulling me to her side, "I introduce you to my only daughter, Isabel. She will be joining me in the management and development of this culinary brand." She raised my hand high, and all eyes and all camera lenses focused on me. I was no longer the abandoned daughter-in-law. I stood next to my mother as the heir to an empire, as a princess who had reclaimed her kingdom. The wedding of the century had become the disaster of the century for Ethan's family, but for me, it was a new beginning, brighter than ever. I took my mother's hand and looked ahead, where a new future, a new life, awaited me. That fateful night ended with Ethan's family being escorted out of the gates of the Haven Estate by the Sovereign Group security team. Before hundreds of eyes and dozens of camera lenses, they were thrown into the night homeless, without honor, and with nothing more than a bleak and dark future. But that was only the beginning of their hell on earth, a hell built with the bricks of greed, arrogance, and betrayal. That same night, the videos of the wedding and the Chitlin banquet became a storm on social media. Hashtags like #Chitlin Wedding, #Revenge of the Century, and #The Grand Dame Strikes Back trended at breakneck speed. It was no longer high society gossip, it became a national media phenomenon. People shared, commented, and created memes. Ethan's anger-distorted face, Chloe's pale face of shame, and especially the image of the luxurious plates of Brunswick stew and chitlins on the tables of a multi-million-dollar banquet became immortal memes. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, the real earthquake began. All major media outlets, from the most important online newspapers to prestigious business journals, published shocking headlines in unison. The downfall of the media executive who lost a $15 estate and his future wife, the legal slap of the century and the spicy revenge of chairwoman Eleanor Vance, and from dream wedding to Chitlin disaster, the bitter end of a greedy traitor. Ethan and Chloe's names became more famous than ever, but it was a fame filled with infamy and humiliation. All information about them was dug up by netizens. Ethan's promiscuous past, Chloe's statements about her fake, posturing life on social media, and even the harsh words Mrs. Dorothy Hayes had said to me in the past were revealed by my former friends. Everything came to light, and they became the laughingstock of the whole city, the topic of all conversations. For Chloe, the influencer who lived on image and public acclaim, this was a fatal blow, a death sentence for her fake life career. Her personal account was attacked by tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of people. Not only did they insult her, but they used precisely that rustic food to scorn her. "Did you eat chitlins today, sweetie? A mistress gets chitlins and a scammer husband. Let's see if you learn not to despise good food now, you phony." The fashion and cosmetic brands that had signed advertising contracts with her in the past unanimously announced the cessation of collaboration, not wanting their brand image to be tainted by this embarrassing scandal. Unable to bear the humiliation, she closed all her social media accounts and did not dare to leave her house. The dream of becoming the daughter-in-law of a wealthy family was shattered. Her influencer career vanished, and in its place only remained a stain that would haunt her for life, the nickname, the Chitlin Snob. But the ones who had to bear the most direct and heavy consequences were Ethan and his family. Expelled from the estate, they had nowhere to go. They had to temporarily stay in an old, cramped apartment of barely 400 square feet, the same one Mrs. Hayes had previously criticized as a rat hole, not fitting their status. The harsh contrast between a $15 million estate and an old apartment, between a life of luxury and a miserable reality, was terrible mental torture. But even that temporary peace didn't last long. The media company where Ethan was an executive faced an unprecedented crisis after the scandal broke out. Large clients, sensitive to image, sent emails and called in unison to demand contract terminations. They could not continue collaborating with a media director whose private life was a disaster, a scammer, and a person of bad repute. The board of directors called an emergency meeting, and the final decision was quick and ruthless. Fire Ethan immediately and issue a press release declaring that they had nothing to do with his personal actions to save the company's remaining reputation. Having lost his job, his house, his future wife, and his honor, Ethan collapsed completely. He no longer shouted or went crazy. He locked himself in that narrow room and drank day and night. He couldn't face anyone. He couldn't answer the phone, he couldn't read the newspapers, but he couldn't escape from himself. My image in the dazzling red dress, my mother's calm smile, and the intense smell of chitlins from that fateful night tormented him in every sleepless night. He had everything in his hands: a wife who truly loved him, the house of his dreams, a bright future. But because of his infinite greed and betrayal, he himself had shattered everything. But the hell didn't stop there. My mother, Eleanor, was not a person to do things halfway. She decided to go all the way to teach them an unforgettable lesson about the weight of the law. The Sovereign Group's legal team formally sued Ethan for fraud and misappropriation of assets for tricking me into signing the deed, and for illegal occupation for occupying and using the estate after the property rights were invalidated. With irrefutable evidence, from the original contract with the secret clause to the power of attorney he tricked me into signing, victory was almost certain. Furthermore, Ethan also had to face a series of lawsuits from the sponsors of his wedding of the century. They had spent millions promoting their brand, but in the end, they were embroiled in an embarrassing media scandal. They demanded full compensation for damage to their image and costs. Debts accumulated like a snowball, and his future darkened behind bars. His mother, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, after witnessing her son go from a star to a criminal in an instant, from pride to shame, finally couldn't bear it anymore. The enormous shock aged her 10 years and weakened her health. Life in a cramped, deficient environment, coupled with the neighbors' scorn, led her to be hospitalized in a state of severe nervous and physical exhaustion. She lay in the cold bed of a public hospital, with no trace of the composure of the wicked mother-in-law who coveted superficial fame from before. She was just an old, helpless woman, watching her family collapse and be ruined by her own stupidity and greed. The hell on earth was not far away. It was the remorse, regret, and humiliation that would haunt them for life. A never-ending sentence. A year later, when the noise of the scandal had gradually subsided, a new story became the topic of conversation in the Hamptons, but this time it was not a tragedy or a comedy, but a story full of inspiration and pride. The Haven estate, which had shocked the world with the Chitlin wedding, had now been dressed anew and had a new mission. It was no longer a closed private estate. My mother and I decided to convert it into a special space, something unprecedented in the U.S., a place that combined high-end American cuisine restaurants with a center for architecture and culinary culture exhibitions. We called it the Heritage Promise. This place not only offered the quintessence of 3 great American culinary traditions, Southern, Western, and Northeast, created by the best chefs of the Sovereign Group in a unique architectural space, but it was also a place to exhibit the designs and models of talented young architects, to organize cultural talks, traditional cooking classes, and weekend markets honoring the organic produce of American farmers. We wanted to turn the estate into a place that honored the value of cultural roots, a place where the children of America could return and feel proud. The opening day of the Heritage Promise was a grand event that attracted the attention of the entire elite, artists, and media. I no longer hid behind the scenes. I wore a silk suit designed by Mrs. Montgomery, standing next to my mother, self-assured and radiant. As the operations director of this project, I was no longer the interior designer who only knew 4 walls. I learned from my mother and participated in management and operations. I found my passion and regained my value, not by building my own home, but by building and spreading good values for the community. My life is now a succession of busy days, but full of joy. I found happiness in work, in the satisfied smiles of customers, in the admiring glances of young culture lovers. I found myself again, a version of myself much stronger and more complete than before. As for the fate of those who made me suffer, they also had the ending they deserved, a tragic ending written by their own wrong choices. Ethan was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for fraud with irrefutable evidence against him, but that was not all. The enormous compensation he had to pay to the sponsors and related parties left him and his family completely ruined. After getting out of prison, he had nothing left. His former company fired him, his friends avoided him, and Ethan Hayes' name became a stain in the media industry. No company wanted to hire him. He had to take all kinds of manual jobs to survive, from delivery driver to waiter at a street food stand. Ironically, a place that sold the food he once despised. Sometimes, people see him sitting quietly in a street corner after a hard day's work, staring with lost eyes at the illuminated building of the Heritage Promise. Perhaps at that moment, he regrets the wife who loved him with all her heart. He regrets the opportunity to change his life that was within his reach, but which he discarded for his own greed and betrayal, but everything was too late. Regret would now be his faithful companion for the rest of his life. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, after a long hospitalization, was discharged, but the enormous shock had aged her 10 years, and her health was weakened. She had to spend her last days in the narrow, old apartment. In pain and shame, her pride, her arrogance, were forever buried with the fall of her precious son. Every day she had to face the truth that her cruel heart and greed had led her entire family to tragedy. It was a mental torture more painful than physical pain. Her entire family had to pay too high a price for their bad choices. They were once high up, looking at me with scorn, but in the end, it was they who sank to the bottom of society. One evening, while I was in the garden of the Heritage Promise, looking at the water lilies in full bloom in the pond, my mother approached and hugged me. "Do you still hate them?" she asked softly. I shook my head and smiled. "No, Mom, I don't hate them anymore. Maybe I should even be grateful to them. If it weren't for their betrayal, I probably never would have discovered my true strength, nor would I have the meaningful life I have today." That's right. Sometimes a door that closes before our eyes does not mean the end, but it is to open a new, wider, and better path for us. And I found my own way, a path built with self-esteem, effort, and the love of a great mother. I had truly been reborn.